Welcome to Blood Bought Church. It's Sunday, May 11th, 2025, and it is Mother's Day. Today I was trying to think of some catchy title for this message, and I don't really have one, but by the end maybe somebody will. We do these recordings and they go up on YouTube. I'm not much of a teacher, but I've learned a couple things. And one of the things I'd like to share with you is something my mom actually taught me, which was, I remember coming home after church one day and being upset over something David had said. And she's like, Chris, sometimes you got to chew the hay and spit out the chaff. So, say the same thing here. I'm going to do the best I can, and we'll see where we go. So, I'm supposed to share a story, or my story, about how I got saved. I don't really have some kind of miraculous way of, how I got saved. I was brought up in a church, and for a while got out of church, got back into church, and there's no real miraculous way of how I got saved. Pastor Rob's got an extraordinary story about how he got saved, and I'm sure a couple other people do too. But instead of that, I'm still going to share a story about me that you may or may not know. So in the fall of last year, I started going to therapy. Felt like that was a good thing for me to do, and I think it is. So anybody who's not in therapy and you're thinking about it, or maybe somebody's pushing you towards that way, it's definitely a good thing. It's good to get an opinion from somebody who's not family or really close friends with you, outside of your circle, who can help tell you how it is. And one of the things that she's helped me do is get to the root of a lot of problems. And we talk about that in church a lot, is you got to get to the root. And sometimes the emotions that we carry and we face really get in the way of getting to that root, because you come off hot and heated and you don't really get a chance to get to the root. So it's a good thing. I would suggest it to anybody who is considering it. And today, again, is Mother's Day, so we celebrate all the mothers in the room. Thank you for being here, and mothers that aren't here, we still celebrate them, and mothers that aren't here anymore too. My mother's gone. She's gone to be with Jesus, though she's not really gone. So there's a little bit of that story that I don't really talk to people a lot about, but it's one of the things we discussed in therapy, which was I blame myself a lot, actually, because the day, well, we need to talk about the health issues that she had. She had some diabetes, and that took over her body, and she was battling with that. She ended up being oxygen reliant and had to be on oxygen through the night. So during the night, her oxygen tubes had come out, and essentially she was without oxygen. So the morning that she passed, I was supposed to pick her up. It was getting close to Christmas time. I took the day off. I had an appointment. I'm like, hey, I'm going to pick you up at our normal time around 7:30, and maybe we'll take you over to Grandma and Papa's house, and we can turn on a Christmas movie, and you and Sophie can spend some time there while I go to my appointment. And she never liked getting up early, so she battled with me about that, and I kept sticking to it, like, no, let's just 7:30. Well, we ended up settling on a time that was closer to, I believe, 9 o'clock. Reluctantly, I settled on that. And as I was getting Sophie ready the morning that Mom was supposed to watch her, I was going to go pick her up, I got a call saying that she's not going to be able to watch her. So, timing. So since that day, I've blamed myself a lot when it comes to timing and being on time. So before that, I struggled with being on time as it is. I don't like to be late. I like to be early. I get anxiety, some might call it. So I like to show up early, and if I'm not showing up early, I feel like I'm late. If I show up on time, to me, I'm late. I know some old school guys are like that as well, but very rarely will you catch me showing up late to anything. Some conversations that I miss with my mother are just, the simple ones. What are you doing today? What's the plan for the weekend? What's going on for dinner? Have you had enough water today? It was one of the big ones. We had to push her with drinking a lot of water, and That usually helps with the diabetes, helps, keep things at bay. But those conversations you can't have anymore. So calling your mom up and talking with her, or even better yet, visiting with her and having those conversations, probably mean a lot more to her than they do you. In Genesis, it talks about God meeting with Adam in the cool of the day because he was interested in what Adam had to say, even though he knows everything, right? God is all-knowing. He knows everything about Adam, and even after they ate the fruit, he knew exactly what was going on. But he still wanted to hear from Adam, just like our parents want to hear from us. So it's always good to keep in touch because they're interested in you. They want to know. Just every Sunday for the past couple months, we keep hearing about how Pastor wants to hear from you. So it's because he cares. So we should care enough to share our story. And there's still daily reminders that I come across that remind me of my mom. So I mentioned a lot cherry blossoms. She used to wear, back in the 90s, they had this cucumber stuff, cucumber melon. So she wore that for a long time, and soon after that was no longer available, or at least you couldn't get it. I don't really remember. She was into cherry blossom smell, so every year we'd get her some kind of cherry blossom thing from Bath & Body Works. She liked lotion, so always did that. And I remember one year, I'm like, hey, let's go see the cherry blossom trees in Washington, D.C. So we took a trip out there, and it was definitely a good trip. So even to this day, coming across cherry blossom trees are something I associate with my mom. I shared that last week that we were in the woods with a bunch of guys for Matt's wedding coming up. We were off for his bachelor party, and we rented ATVs, and in the middle of the woods, you wouldn't think it, but a cherry blossom tree was there. We rode right under it, the only one in the woods. No reason for it to be there. But it was. It reminded me of her. And even coming to church, there's still sugar pills in the back underneath the TV. I got those for her because when her sugar was acting up, or when it was low specifically, she would kind of wobble, almost like a drunkard. I'm like, this is not right. So we get sugar pills, and it helps bring that up a little bit quicker, and she can recover a little bit faster. So I'm talking about mourning this morning. In Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 4, it says, a time to weep, a time to laugh, and a time to mourn, a time to dance. So we talk about time, and there's no time that exists in heaven, correct? Can you back me up on that? It's an eternity, right? So whenever we get a week off for work to, kind of get ourselves together, or maybe they give us 2 weeks or maybe a month off, we kind of put a time limit on ourselves to mourn. And we say, after this, we're getting back to it, and we expect you to be performing, and, everything carries on. So, pastors also talked about this in the past, that one of the first things that he thinks about in the morning is that Cindy's not here. It's continuous mourning. But that doesn't mean we have to let it dominate our life, correct? Correct? Thank you. Romans 12:15 says, rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. I believe this is talking about the partnership that we have, right? So when our spouse or one of our friends is going through a tough time, yeah, you want to try to bring them out of it. That's nature, but it's okay to weep, men. And it's okay to rejoice. I think we read a little bit out of Matthew this morning. Matthew chapter 5, verse 4, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. All right. So again, mourning is not something that we have to push down. It's something that's, again, it's expected for a limited time, but it's not. It just goes on. Some say it gets easier as you get older. Some say it doesn't. but it's still something that we deal with, and it's how you deal with it that means the most. You don't have to stay in a depression. You can have good memories. My mom used to make sausage balls for Christmas. It's the simplest recipe in the world. There's no unit of measure. It is sausage, Bisquick, and cheese. There's no real measurement. If it gets too dry, put a little milk in it. If it's too wet, put a little bit more Bisquick. There's no measurement to it. But for some reason, hers were always the best. So I adopted that trend and started doing them myself. And it's brought me a lot of joy. I've also been having trouble sleeping over the past few months, something that's kind of new to me. I haven't really had issues sleeping, but over the past few months I have. And talking about this with my therapist, she recommended reading. Like, well, I haven't really read a full book since high school, but if you think it'll work, go ahead. So she handed me this book called The Shack. Has anybody read this book? Seen the movie? There's a movie. If you want to see the movie, it's on Netflix right now, so you can watch it for free. If you have a subscription, that is. But it's a good book. And she said, well, it's about the movement of your eyes back and forth, and it tricks your brain into feeling sleepy. Well, that didn't work for me because I came super interested in the book. So I kept endless chapter after chapter. I just stayed awake wanting to read more and read more. So here, if you haven't read the book, I'm giving you a little synopsis of what happens in the book. And if you want to take it home, you're more than welcome to read it, or again, watch the movie on Netflix. So it's going to start off a little dark. There's a man by the name of Mackenzie they call Mac in the book. Mac has 3 children, and his wife's name is Nan. Mac ends up taking his 3 children to the lake. Nan's not there. He sits on the beach one morning after breakfast, and his daughter, older daughter, goes out on a canoe with a friend, and they have a good time while his younger daughter stays back at a picnic table and starts coloring. Her name is Missy. Missy's brought up later, but the canoe ends up tipping. Mac used to be a lifeguard, and he swam out to rescue the 2 children who were having issues getting the canoe back up, and one was actually stuck under the canoe. And by the time he got back to check on his daughter, who was stuck at the picnic table coloring, she was gone, nowhere to be found. So he searched the camp along with other people that were in the area. Where's Missy? Trying to find out where she was, and maybe she's just in the restroom or something. And this turned into a panic after a while, after Missy was no longer in sight. And nobody had seen her except for one party of young men who said they saw her being loaded into a truck by another man. They called in the authorities to help find out what was going on and track down Missy. And one of them came across the pin that was on the table. It was a ladybug, and that's important because one of the detectives ends up finding out that that ladybug is tied to a serial killer. He calls himself the little lady killer. And his MO is to leave little pins behind. He must have got them all in bulk. And for each little lady that he takes the life of, he puts a dot on the ladybug. And this was dot number 5. The last one was number 4. So if you can, pardon me, connect the dots, this is the 5th murder that he's going to take the life of Missy. This man was a very skilled hunter. He was very skilled in the woods. He was an expert tracker. He knew what he was doing, whereas most people didn't. Had a 4-wheel drive that he stole and painted and scraped numbers off of, but people know who he was because they saw the truck being taken. So anyway, long story short, they end up tracking down where the murder had happened. They had to go on foot after they had found a trail off into the woods where it was very hard to get to, but there was a shack deep into the woods where the murder of Missy took place. The body was never recovered, but her dress, little red dress that she was wearing, was there, as was a giant puddle of blood in the shack. So they knew right away that this was the end of the road for them, the end of the road for Missy. So Mac ends up going into a state of mourning, a state of depression, something that he has a hard time getting out of, and he even has a name for it. He calls the Great Darkness. The Great Darkness is his depression, which, again, he has a lot of blame for himself for going to save one and not the other and losing Missy, and rightfully so, because his daughter's gone. So he struggles with this for some time. His wife has a very close relationship. Katie, who used to go here frequently, used to talk to God as if he were Papa. And in this book, she was the first person I thought of because Nan, his wife, refers to God as Papa, Papa God. Because of her relationship, she felt that God was so close to her, she was so close to God that she could have a little nickname for him, which is Papa God. And again, chew the hay, spit out the chaff. So Mac ends up getting a letter in the mail shortly after, which reads, "Mackenzie, it's been a while. I have missed you. I'll be at the shack next weekend if you want to get together. Papa." So Mac continues to battle with himself right now after receiving the letter. Maybe it's somebody playing a cruel joke. Maybe it's the murderer wanting to meet with Mackenzie and, take another life or take another victim. Maybe it was God. So Mackenzie, after wrestling with himself, ends up going to the shack by himself. And when he shows up to the shack, he knows exactly where it was because he had been there before. When he shows up to the shack, it's completely empty. There's not much there. It's beaten down. It's cold. There's, it's not very kept. It's rather beat down. It's an old shack. He ends up becoming very frustrated, kicks over some tables, and wrestles with God in the moment, telling him, "Why would you want me to come meet here? This is your fault." Ends up blaming God for a lot of this. "Why didn't you step in? You could have done something." He ends up walking out, and as he walks out back to the Jeep that he took up to the site, God shows up. The woods start to turn from winter to spring with vibrant colors and flowers and trees and all kinds of springtime smells. And as he turns around, he sees the shack that he had just walked from become something completely different. It was very new, very well kept, still rustic, but it was different than before. And as he walked up to the shack, he knocked on the door and God shows up. God shows up in the book as three different people. The person that answers the door is a big black lady. This is Papa. In the book, they talk about why Papa looks like this, why God looks like this to Mackenzie, and it is because earlier in the book, he describes his image of God as being somewhat of a wizard, long beard, white robe, kind of how we all, maybe not we all, that's an assumption, but sometimes we have this picture of God in our heads, and the reason God showed up as a black lady was to fight these assumptions that we have about God, that he's neither man nor woman. So Papa in this state to Mac is a black lady. There's also another person in the room. She is of Latin American, Asian, kind of Oriental looking. Her name I can't pronounce, but I think it's Sarah Yu, and she is depicted to be the Spirit. So we have the Father, the Spirit, and there's another young man. His name is Jesus, and he looks just as the Bible kind of depicts him to be, a younger man, around 33, carpenter, has a carpenter workshop in the shed that he works on different things. Over the next few chapters of the book, actually most of the remaining book is about his time spent with each one of these people, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And he has many conversations with each one of them. Talks to the Father about why he's not getting involved, why he didn't get involved with Missy. And there's a lot to be said for the book. I don't have too much time. But One of the things that Papa talks about in the book is forgiveness and love. So Papa emphasizes God's love and forgiveness even in the face of tragedy, and encourages Mac to forgive himself and others, including the killer of Missy. We'll come back to the father shortly after I talk about the next couple ones. The book also talks about the death of Missy. Let's stick on Papa for another minute. It says, Papa helps Mac understand that Missy's death and other tragedies are not God's doing, but the result of humans straying from God's will. And then Papa suggests that even in the face of suffering, there can be meaning and purpose in life, and that God has a greater plan. He spends time with the Spirit. I'm not going to say her name again because I'm going to get it wrong. Spends time with the Spirit, and she takes him into a garden. It's a real mess of a garden. There's flowers mixed with herbs, mixed with trees, mixed with shrubs, and all these other things growing in this massive garden. Doesn't really make any sense. There's no lines of green beans or rows of corn in this garden. It's just all a big jumbled up mess. And for something that's of God, it seems kind of abnormal to Mac because he thought everything had some kind of structure. The Spirit ends up telling him that this is beautiful. And this is actually a representation of your mind, Mac, which was pretty interesting to me because I like to consider a lot of my life as being structured, but really it's a tangled up mess. And Mac ended up seeing some good in that as well. The Spirit shows up randomly throughout the book, kind of pops up, if you will. And even throughout conversations that Mac has with the Father or Papa God, the Spirit will then talk to Mac later on, maybe later in the chapter or the next chapter, about the conversation that they had. And Mac was like, "Oh, you were there too?" And the Spirit responds with, "I'm always there." And the same thing happens with Jesus, actually. The time he spends with Jesus, he kind of cherishes a little bit more than the other two, mainly because he feels he can relate to Jesus, being that he's a little bit closer to his age, he's a little bit more human, and rightfully so. Jesus was a man, right? So the conversations feel a little bit more real with Jesus, and he even gets to walk on water with Jesus, and they walk across this massive lake, which in real life, where the shack was, there was a massive lake. And he gets to walk across water with Jesus to the other side, and he's on a mission to meet with somebody else whom he doesn't know. And in the book, this person is referred to as Sophia, which is my daughter's name. Sophia in the book, now we've reached 4 different characters, all kind of related to God, and Sophia is really a projection of the Father, Papa. And this is supposed to be the judge, okay? You have to stick with me for a minute. It really is a good book. But the judge, Sophia, ends up, to get to Sophia, you have to be in a very dark cave, and Sophia's very bright. She's lots of light is coming off of her, and there's almost a waterfall that's going over the cave, and that comes in important in a few minutes. But Sophia ends up asking Mac a couple questions, and basically it was about judgment and how he needs to, getting him to the point of not wanting to be a judge. So there's a little bit of the book I'd like to read to you, if you can bear with me for a couple minutes through this. Mac, this is where we're talking about judgment now. And Mac says, "But I thought you said I was here," and Sophia interrupts him. She does this quite frequently throughout this. So, "For judgment." She remained cool and placed it as summer breeze as she finished his question. "I did, but you are not on trial here." Mac took a deep breath, relieved at her words. And Sophia says, "You will be the judge." The knot in his stomach returned as he realized what she had said. Finally, he dropped his eyes onto the chair and stood waiting for him. "What, me? I'd rather not," he paused. I don't have the ability to judge. And Sophia responds, "Oh, that's not true." She returned quickly in reply, tinged now with a hint of sarcasm. "You have already proven yourself very capable, even in our short time together, and besides, you have judged many throughout your life. You have judged the actions and even motivations of others as if you somehow knew them, what truth was in them. You have judged the color of their skin and body language and body odor, excuse me. You have judged history and relationships. You have even judged the value of a person's life by the quality of your concept of beauty. By all accounts, you are quite well practiced in the activity." Mac felt shame reddening his face. He had to admit he had done an awful lot of judging in his time. But he was no different from anyone else, was he? Who doesn't jump to conclusions about others from the way they impact us? There it was again, his self-centered view of the world around him. He looked up and saw her peering intently at him, because she can read his thoughts. She knows exactly what he's thinking, and quickly looked down. Sophia said, "Tell me, if I may ask, on what criteria do you base your judgments?" Mac looked up and tried to meet her gaze, but found that when he had looked directly at her, he was thinking wavered. To peer into her eyes and to keep a train of coherent and logical thought seemed impossible. He had to look away into the darkness of the corner of the room, hoping to collect himself. Nothing that seems to make much sense at the moment, he finally admitted, his voice faltering. "I confess that when I made those judgments, I felt quite justified. But now," she interrupts him, "of course you did. Like it was a statement of fact. Like something routine, not playing for even a moment upon his evident shame and distress. Judging requires that you think of yourself superior over the one you judge. Well, today you will be given the opportunity to put all your ability to use. Come on," she said, patting him on the back of the chair. "I want you to sit here, now." Hesitantly but obediently, he walked towards her in the waiting chair. With each step seemed to grow smaller, or they both grew larger. He couldn't tell which. He crawled up onto the chair and felt childish with a massive desktop in front of him, his feet barely touching the floor. "And just what will I be judging?" he asked, turning up and looking at her. "Not what," she paused and moved to the side of the desk. "Whom?" His discomfort was growing in leaps and bounds, and sitting on an oversized regal chair didn't help. What right did he have to judge anyone? Sure, in some measurement he probably was guilty of judging almost everybody. Everybody he had met and many he had not. Mac knew that he was thoroughly guilty of being self-centered. How dare he judge anyone else? All of his judgments had been superficial, based on appearance, actions, things really interpreted by whatever the state of mind and prejudice that supported them. I'll skip on down. She says, "Your imagination," interrupting his train of thought, "is not serving you well at this moment." And he thinks to himself, "No kidding, Sherlock." I'll skip on down. She says, "Whether you can or cannot is yet to be determined." Max says, "I really can't do this." And Sophia says, "Whether you can or cannot is yet to be determined," she said with a smile. "And my name is not Sherlock." He continues to ask her, "Whom will I judge?" And Sophia responds, "God and the human race." She said it was if there was no particular consequence. The words simply rolled off her tongue as if it were a daily occurrence. Mac, dumbfounded, "You've got to be kidding." She says, "Why not? Surely there are many people in your world you think deserve judgment. There must be at least a few who are to blame for much pain and suffering. What about the greedy who feed off the poor of the world? What about the ones who sacrifice their children to war? What about the men who beat their wives, Mackenzie? What about the fathers who beat their sons for no reason but to assuage their own suffering? Don't they deserve judgment, Mackenzie?" Mac could sense the depths of unresolved anger rising like a flood in fury. Right here, I'll stop and say that Mac's relationship with his father was lacking. His father would beat him as a child. He sank back into the chair, trying to maintain his balance against the onslaught of images. But he could feel his control ebbing away. His stomach knotted as he clenched his fists, breathing coming short and quick. And what about the man who preys on innocent little girls? What about him? Mackenzie, is that man guilty? Should he be judged? Mac screams, yes. It says, damn him to hell. Is he to blame for your loss? Mac says, yes. What about his father, the man who twisted his son into terror? What about him? Yes, him too. How far do we go back, Mackenzie? The legacy of brokenness goes all the way back to Adam. What about him? But why stop there? What about God? God started this whole thing. Is God to blame? Mackenzie was reeling. He didn't like being a judge at all and would rather he didn't like being a judge at all, but would rather the one on trial. The woman was unrelenting. Isn't this where you are stuck, Mackenzie? Isn't this what fuels the great sadness? That God cannot be trusted. Surely a father like you can judge the father. Again, his anger rose like towering flame. He wanted to lash out, but he was right. And there was no point to deny it. She continued, isn't that your just complaint, Mackenzie? That God has failed you? That he failed Missy? That before the creation, God knew that one day your Missy would be brutally and brutalized, but he still created her? And then he allowed that twisted soul to snatch her from your loving arms when he had the power to stop him? Isn't God to blame, Mackenzie? Mac was looking at the floor, a flurry of images pulling his emotions in every direction. Finally, he said it, louder than he intended, and pointed his finger right at her and said, yes, God is to blame. The accusation hung in the room as if gravel fell onto his heart. Then, she said with finality, if you are able to judge God so easily, you certainly can judge the world. Again, she spoke with without emotion. You must choose 2 of your children to spend eternity in God's new heaven and new earth, but only 2. Remember, he has 3. So that's where I'll stop reading. So here, this book covers a lot, but judgment and forgiveness is really, and forgiveness really might be the main point of this book. Later on in the book, God ends up showing himself to Mac as an older man, a grandfather, if you will, and takes Mac into the woods. And every tree that they pass that has a marking on it, it's like a red arch. He touches each red arch, or every rock that they pass that has a red arch on it, he'll touch this arch, and as if he knew exactly where he was going. And a couple miles into the hike, they finally reach this cave that's all blocked off by rocks, and the whole point of them being on this walk together was to recover Missy's body. The killer had taken Missy's body even further into the woods, but marking his path with red paint, which I found interesting. But they ended up finding Missy's body. This is while he's with God. And towards the end of the conversation with God, he starts explaining how his relationship with his father was not the best, and how God wants him to forgive his father and to forgive the killer. All while he's recovering Missy's body, he has to continually repeat to himself, I forgive you. I forgive you. And each time it grows with confidence, I forgive you. And he battles with God again, saying, how long do I have to do this? How long do I have to forgive the man that took my daughter's life? And God says, maybe daily. Forgiveness and mourning is something that we deal with daily. We talk about the dead man, how we have to get up in the morning and put deodorant on, comb our hair, and maybe get a shower. These are just things that we deal with every day. There's no real time limit. And further on into the book, he spends a little bit of time with the Spirit, and the Spirit asks to open his eyes on the last night that he's with the three. And as the Spirit opens his eyes in the darkness of the night, these colors start forming. Small colors, balls of different shades of blue and yellow and red and pink and green, all these different colors start emerging. And as they become closer to Mac and they get closer to his sight, they find that these are spirits of children that are happy, and they gleam when Jesus shows up to walk with them. It seems to be the center of their attention whenever Jesus is around. And off in the corner, he spots another light that's not as bright, not as colorful, and he knows that it's his father, the one that beat him as a child. And the first thing he does, without hesitation, is runs to him and gives him a hug. And talks about how he forgives him. And as he says, "I forgive you," the light of his father bursts through, as if you were turning on a flashlight. All kinds of different colors burst out, as if his father were saying, "I'm sorry too." I had to figure out how to wrap this up. Okay. I won't finish the book for you. I was going to, but if you want to read it, feel free to read it. It really is good. But all in all, for me, what has therapy done for me? What has the book done for me, except keep me awake at night, which it wasn't supposed to do in the first place? Was it brought me a little bit closer to my understanding of God and how our walk should be with Him and how forgiveness is. And there's a lot of, again, blame for myself that I put onto myself for my mother's death, and part of that is having to forgive me. And part of the book talks about how wonderful the time was with God and how wonderful everything was. And Mac's like, I would rather just stay here instead of go home. And God gives him this choice. And I found comfort in this conversation as well, because if I was my mom, I wouldn't want to come back either. During the time of judgment, Sophia starts really badgering. You could tell from the short part that I read that he needs to choose. And shortly after the part I read with you, he begins to battle even stronger with God, saying, no, don't take any of them to hell. Send me. I'll do it. And that's just what God did for us, is send Jesus. He sent his only son so that we don't have to go to hell. And that is so strong. Can you imagine sending your only child to die for the world's sins? I'll wrap this up. So today is Mother's Day, and we want to honor the mothers in our lives that are still here and not here. That's okay. You can still honor them. Whether that's putting flowers on a grave, or listening to her favorite songs, or maybe it's cooking her favorite meal. It might bring you some memories. Or calling up other moms in your life and letting them know how much you love them and how much respect you have for them. A lot of these good memories that I share, they're not for a great sadness, or the deep sadness, however Matt calls it, but sometimes they are sad. But it's good to remember that it's okay to be sad. It's not okay to dwell there and be sad forever. It's okay to have these memories bring upon you, how your mom was, and how you can continue on with some of the legacy that she left behind. Just you don't have to be sad. You can be happy. Because eventually, we will see them again someday.
don't know if I missed it or not, but did you give a testimony of how you got saved?
No, I started at the beginning with that. I don't have a miraculous testimony about how I got saved. I really don't. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and there's no turning. My mom brought me up in a church. I don't have anything that's... That's all I got. Anybody have any questions while we're here? Complaints? I do have this book if anybody wants to take it home and read it. You're more than welcome to come and see me afterwards. The movie's on Netflix. It's a really great movie as well, but highly recommend it. And for those of you even considering thinking about therapy, don't hesitate and wait and spend another day with the frogs and the locusts. It's okay to go talk to somebody.